The Military Health Professions Scholarship Program, or HPSP, can be an amazing, life-changing opportunity, but not everything about it is so great. Hey, what's going on? If you're new to this channel, my name's Jack and I'm a first-year medical student at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And today I'm going to be talking about my experience applying for the HPSP. Now really quick, just to give some background info on the HPSP because my story is kind of long, but the HPSP is a program designed by the military to pay for different graduate studies, including medical, dental, pharmacy, and physician's assistant school. It pays for all tuition, all books, necessary equipment needed during 4 years or 3 years. There's a 3-year option of school. It offers a $20,000 signing bonus, which is one of the major perks, and then a $2,400 monthly stipend to be used for whatever you want. Now with that comes some things that you have to repay at the end. For every year that you're on the scholarship, you owe 1 year back to the military. Now for dental, physician's assistant, and pharmacy, I don't know the exact details, but with medical, so either MD or DO, those 4 years or 3 years that you owe after you graduate do not start until after residency. I don't know if there's an equivalent for the other programs, but just for an example, if you do one of the longer residencies like surgery or neurosurgery that lasts like 6 or 7 years, you could do a military residency that lasts that long, but the time you actually owe back wouldn't start until after that. So you could end up being like 11 years in the military with that. So just something to be aware of. Now a quick disclaimer, this story that I have has a lot of negative tones to it. It wasn't a great experience, but I just want to make clear that those feelings are not directed at the military as a whole. So the reason that I wanted to apply for the HPSP had to do with just people who were around me. I was involved with a lot of military families while I was living in Northern Virginia who kind of introduced me to the HPSP. But then I also had a professor who was a general surgeon who went through med school through the HPSP. And he talked about his experience and about how life-changing it was and amazing and how it opened up so many opportunities for him and how grateful he was for the program. And so those kind of experiences made me gravitate towards that desire to apply for the HPSP. So there are some requirements to the application. Not everybody who applies for it will get accepted. I don't have any information on the number of applicants they have and then people who are accepted for it, but it is open on a rolling basis, meaning that it usually will start in like August and go till about May. And just once the positions are filled or the spots for the scholarships are filled, it's done. And there are always much fewer 3-year scholarships available than the 4-year scholarships. So if you're planning on doing a 3-year, you're going to want to start as early as possible to make sure that you get one of the scholarships. And then there are some just general military requirements. You have to be able to pass the height and weight standards along with the physical fitness exam that is done at Meps, which is the Military Entrance Processing Station. I'm not really going to get too much into that, but I'll talk about that a little later. And then to get things started with the application, you just need to meet with a recruiter. What I did was I just Googled Air Force HPSP because I wanted to do it through the Air Force. It took me to a link, it sent an email out to a recruiter, and then he got back to me. And so that brings us to the start of my story. I started the HPSP application in August of 2020. So from the very beginning, unfortunately, I had a little misconception of what I was getting into. I remember reading on this HPSP fact sheet that there was a thing called a matrix applicant. And what that said on the sheet was that if you had certain or specific statistics during your undergrad and on your MCAT, that you were like automatically accepted for the scholarship. What I took that to mean was that if I had those stats, I just had to apply and I was kind of in. And that is not what that means. So if you are looking at it and wondering if you are a matrix applicant, what it really means is that at the end of the process of getting all your paperwork in, going through Meps, passing all the qualifications and everything, it's just the very final step you get to skip, and it's meeting with the accession board. At least that's what they call it. And what I understood it to be is it's basically like an interview at the end where some military personnel sit down with you and essentially just interview you about why you want to be a member of the military, why you want to have the HPSP for your program, and then they make the final decision on whether or not you are accepted. Whereas if you are the matrix applicant, you get to skip that last part. It's as long as you have all your paperwork, you pass all the qualifications and everything, then you're in, you get the scholarship. So I recently learned that the matrix applicant requirements have actually just changed. So when I was doing my application, the requirements were to have a 3.4 GPA during your undergrad. You had to have a 504 on the MCAT with at least a 124 on each subsection. And so when I was applying, I was a matrix applicant, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to apply, but it has been changed and updated. And so it is now required that you have a 3.6 GPA undergrad, a 505 on the MCAT, and the 124 subsection minimum has not changed. That's the only thing that didn't change. So actually, if I were to apply today, I would not be a matrix applicant because those stats are different. And if you're interested in my stats, you can check out this video right here where I go more into detail with that. But that's kind of just the beginning of what the matrix applicant is. So once I had that kind of all sorted out, I reached out to the recruiter through that link, and then he sent me an email with kind of some starter materials that he needed from me. It was basic information, kind of just filling out what school I was at, what program I'm essentially going to apply for, MD, DO, DDS, whatever it was, and then just some other basic info about me. And then I sent that off to him, and he looked at it, I'm sure, reviewed it, and then he called me a few days later to just kind of introduce himself. Now, this person I worked with for a long time, and just for the aspect of the story, I'm going to call him T1. They have different like titles, and this first person I met with was a technical sergeant, a TSGT, so we're just going to call him T1 for the story. So T1 reached out to me, kind of introduced himself, said that he was going to send me a lot more paperwork, which was very true. And he said to just look out for that in an email. And then a couple days later, I got it. And essentially it was just more questionnaires. I had to write like a couple small essays about why I wanted to do the HPSP, which I thought was kind of interesting. But I got all that. I had to get proof of enrollment, and then a not official transcript just so they could kind of see where I was. And then by the end, I'd have to send in an official transcript, of course. But that was kind of the beginning stages. And then a couple weeks later, he called me to go through this really big health checklist that they have. I believe it's 160 questions, and it just goes through like every system of the body, head to toe, to make sure you don't have any like huge underlying health conditions. And so everything was pretty much good with mine, but there were three things that stood out to him. It was that I had some back issues in the past. I had a broken knee a couple years ago, and then some jaw issues where I had to wear like this weird retainer. But all those were kind of older and in the past, and I didn't think they were going to be big deals. And he actually told me to not even worry about the jaw issue. He said, that one I'm going to mark, but really don't worry about it. It's not going to be a big deal. So remember that, because we're going to get back to that in just a minute. But anyway, he went through all that, and he said, okay, things look good. We're going to keep going. I need you to get all of your medical records. So I begin trying to gather all my medical records from all the different hospitals that I've been to over the years, and it took me about 3 weeks. So it wasn't awful. I had to go through, obviously, the hospital administration to get them, but I sent them off, and the date of that was October 22nd, is when I sent my first batch of medical records to T1 to get them reviewed. It took him about 2 weeks to kind of go through everything, but in the meantime, during those 2 weeks, he had me set up an account on the application portal. It was just an online system, so he could kind of keep track of me through there and make sure I had all the correct paperwork. I didn't hear back about the medical records until November 5th. So it wasn't like a huge wait, but I mean, there were some weeks in there, and they were denied at first. I was told that I didn't have enough detail in my medical records, which I thought was really weird, because I mean, they're my records, but I'm not the one who's writing them or anything. Like that's the doctor's. But he told me, look, you got to just see if they have anything else that you can turn in. But he kept assuring me, like, hey, look, it's not going to be a big deal. You're going to get in. You're a matrix applicant. They love matrix applicants. Everything's going to be fine. Just figure out how you can get more records, send them to me, and we'll keep going. So I reach out to the hospitals and I called them and say, hey, this is for a military physical exam and they need like more detail. I don't know if you sent them everything or you sent me everything to send them, but they're requesting more documents. And so I thought that was kind of weird that I didn't get everything at first, but I was sent a few more documents, and then I sent those over to T1. He took a look at it, and again it was denied, but this time it was for a more specific reason. It was for the back issues and the knee issues. They wanted to get the x-rays of when I had my back injury a few years ago. And then I also got an MRI done when I broke my knee, and they wanted that MRI. So then I had to go and track those down. I also didn't really understand why they didn't just tell me on that first denial that they wanted the back x-rays and the MRI. I mean, that's a fair thing to request, but I don't know why it took them two denials to ask me that. So I was working on that, but unfortunately that took us up to about Christmas break, and things kind of got a little weird during then because like the offices were on break and it was kind of just a mess. So during that Christmas break, nothing really progressed. So Christmas break ends and I finally got my back x-rays and my MRI, and I sent those in on February 24th. So already we're like three and a half months into this process. And I didn't hear anything until March 4th. So it wasn't like a long time, but it took another couple weeks. And it really wasn't any update other than that they have them and that they're reviewing them. And the other weird thing was that the day before that, so on March 3rd, I got another email from just like the Air Force requesting that I apply for the HPSP. So that kind of made me feel like they didn't really have their record straight because I was already pretty deep into the process of applying, and then they sent that out again, just kind of the generic email. So I don't know if their email list just got messed up or they kind of just weren't paying attention to who they were sending it, but that was kind of weird that I got that like welcome email again. So as they're reviewing all the documents, on March 15th, I actually got transferred to a different recruiter. It was another technical sergeant, so for the story's sake, we're just going to call this technical sergeant T2. So T1 emailed me and said, hey, we're going to transfer all your stuff over to T2. And that's just how the process worked, I guess. I didn't really have anything to say about it. I mean, that's just how it was. But T2 is a little more strict than T1 and emailed me and said that my records needed to be in chronological order and they had to be circled. The dates had to be circled in red pen. And I just thought, man, this is really weird. But apparently T1 was supposed to do that before they were sent over to T2, but that didn't happen. So that was just another kind of miscommunication or something happened along the process. So I ended up having to do that. So the records were sent back and denied again because the dates weren't circled in red, because they were in chronological order, but they just weren't circled. So I remember my wife and we were sitting on our couch and we just had all my records kind of spread out. And it was really stressful trying to do this. And we just were going through them with red pens and circling dates. Now, I don't know if this is normal, but then just like 2 weeks later on March 26th, I was transferred to another recruiter. So I already had T1 and T2, and then this time I was transferred to a master sergeant. I don't really know the big differences between them, but for the story, we're gonna call this one M1. So all my records got transferred first from T1 to T2. I had to do all that stuff, and then T2 transferred them over to M1. And then he was kind of the final person that I worked with. And this has kind of set the process back again because this M1 didn't really know much about me or the process or where I was. So he had to kind of review everything and get settled in before moving on to really anything else. So M1 has my documents. They're circled, they're in chronological order. They really have everything that I have. And he sends them over to Meps for them to review so that I can get a date for my Meps physical. And this was on April 1st. And then on April 7th, he got the denial saying that there still wasn't enough information. And now they're asking for something about a condition I had when I was like literally 4 days old. And at this point, I'm kind of getting sick of it because like I understand them needing my documents, but they could have asked me at the very beginning. They just kept coming back, and the cycle of send them off and deny it and then send it again and deny it was just really getting frustrating. And then they're just asking about these weird conditions. Like when I was 4 days old, like I have absolutely no idea. And I'm like, why does that even matter? But that's what they wanted. So I got it. And then I sent it over, and it again got denied because it wasn't detailed enough or something. And it's like, I don't know what these doctors were doing in 1995. Like, I can't go back and have them rewrite the notes. And so what I had to do was I had to write a letter myself saying that I have gone through and I have gotten every medical record that I have access to, and that all these things, these little details that I don't know about, I don't have them because I was 4 days old when this happened. And it was a really strange letter. So I write that letter and I send it over to Meps and wait again. And at this point, I'm just expecting a denial, and it did come, because now what they wanted are my physical therapy notes. Now, I guess that's kind of medical records, but it didn't ever cross my mind to get physical therapy notes, and they never said anything about it either. So then I had to go back like 4 years. I had to go back and get those physical therapy notes and send those over. And I sent over my physical therapy notes on April 27th. So we're really like getting to the end of the cycle at this point. It's almost May. And I remember just being really frustrated because they just kept telling me, oh, it's just gonna be this last time. Don't worry, you're gonna get into the program. You're gonna get accepted. Because at this point I had been accepted to med school. I was accepted in January. And so I'm just waiting for this process to get done so that everything can be set. Because once you're accepted to med school, it helps out a little bit too. And so they were like, yeah, you're a matrix applicant. You're already accepted to med school. Don't worry, just get this last document in and you're gonna get the scholarship. Don't worry. And so after April 27th, I was just kind of waiting. I didn't really hear anything from M1 about getting up to Meps. And then finally, after my wife and I actually were on a vacation in Florida to kind of escape everything, I finally got a call saying that I had a Meps appointment. They finally accepted all my documents. And this was on May 18th, and they wanted me in on May 24th. So I had like 6 days to get to my Meps appointment. I was in Florida, the Meps appointment was in Utah. We weren't actually planning on going back to Utah. I was hoping I could do the Meps appointment somewhere else, but it had to be in Utah. And so we had to change some plans, we had to change some flights and go back to Utah so that I could do my Meps appointment on May 24th. I'm not really gonna get into the Meps appointment because that's a whole nother story. It's kind of a weird process, so I might do a video about that in the future. But I get to Meps, everything goes well, I pass all the tests, I don't have anything like that's glaring or anything that they're gonna kick me out for. But at the very end, what they do is have you go and meet with the doctor there, and he goes through your medical records and just double checks everything again. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this last check again, or finally like a last check. Hopefully like this is it. So I'm just sitting there waiting, I get called in, and then he goes through and he sees this thing about my jaw and that I had to wear a splint. And this happened 7 years ago. But he sees that, and I get disqualified for it right then and there after everything. And I just remember sitting there and I wasn't upset, I was just kind of shocked, because this whole time since like September or October, I was told that this jaw thing is not going to be an issue. I was honest, I was worried a little bit about my back and my knee, because those, I don't know, seemed like bigger injuries to me. But this thing I had with my jaw 7 years ago, and that's what got me disqualified, it was kind of upsetting. But the doctor, he did allow me to call my dentist to get like a statement saying that this wasn't an issue anymore. And once he got that, he, I guess, downgraded or upgraded, I don't know, from disqualified to conditionally disqualified, which honestly isn't much better. It just means that I can submit a waiver to try and get approved. But the waiver is kind of difficult. So what happened after the Meps appointment and all that, and everything being conditionally disqualified, I called M1, and when he answered the phone, he was not surprised by the jaw thing, which to me meant that he knew it was going to happen. And so, because he was asking about it kind of before I even explained anything. So to me that meant he knew he was lying about it or something, and maybe he had been lying for me this whole time. But he said he was going to start the process of the waiver, but it had to be sent to the Surgeon General of the Air Force. So now I went from dealing with just these like Meps workers to the Surgeon General of the Air Force. But it did require me to go get a new consult from my dentist about my jaw, my TMJ issue. So I did that, And my dentist sent me a record over and it said, hey, look, I've looked at the jaw. It's a no issue anymore. This was a really long time ago. He's cleared for like whatever it is that he needs to be cleared for. Like, I see no issues with it. So I send that over to M1. He sends it to the Surgeon General of the Air Force. And it got sent on June 22nd. And then a week later on June 29th, surprise, it got denied. So this pattern just kept continuing. And the reason that it got denied was that it wasn't written on like an official letterhead from my dentist's office. He just kind of wrote it on a piece of paper and signed it. But apparently the Surgeon General of the Air Force needed it to be like super official and on his letterhead or his medical documents or something. So I called my dentist and said, hey, they're being kind of like super picky about this. I need you to actually write it on one of your medical documents. So he did that. He was really cool about it, extremely helpful. He did it, sent it over to me, and then I sent it to M1. And then I heard back the next day from M1, and it wasn't about the actual waiver, but it was just telling me that I was no longer eligible for the 4-year scholarship because they had reached the end of the cycle. They had filled them all. And I was really upset about that because I wanted the 4-year scholarship. But he said that he was gonna keep working with me so that I could be eligible for the 3-year scholarship. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll keep doing this and see what happens. Like, there's no harm in keep trying, I guess. So it got resent to the Surgeon General on July 2nd. And then on July 9th, it was again denied. And this time they denied it because they said it wasn't signed and dated. Now, I don't know what they were looking at because this is it. This is the actual letter right here. And clearly it is signed and it's dated. So I really don't know what they were talking about. And I sent I sent an email replying like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, it is signed and dated. So here I'm sending it again. Maybe the third time it'll work, right? Third time's always a charm. And that was on July 28th that I resent it again for the third time, trying to get this application done. And after that, I never heard anything again. So I really don't know what happened with it, but that ended my hopes of getting the HPSP for med school and having all the benefits of it. And then at that point I was like, wow, well, I'm gonna have to now really make some changes because I was planning on the HPSP paying for med school. And now I needed to fill out some paperwork and submit some forms to the school to make sure the financial side of stuff worked out. And it was really stressful because it was just in my head the whole time that the HPSP was gonna work out, because I just kept continually getting told that, and it was just cycle after cycle of denial and hope and then denial and hope, and it was really frustrating. But I got everything worked out with the school. Everything ended up working out. But it was really frustrating. It cost me a lot of time. It cost me some money. I mean, I had to get some flights that I wasn't planning on. My housing situation got all messed up because my wife and I had moved out to DC early, because since they kept telling me, hey, plan on getting the scholarship. Another thing I actually forgot to mention is that you have to do a training in the summer that lasts like 9 weeks, I think. I forget the exact number, but you have to do training in that summer. And so I was planning on moving to DC a little bit early, kind of getting settled in, so that when I went and did that training, my wife wasn't stuck without like some solid plans at least. And so that all got messed up, and we ended up having to move because of it. And it was just, it was a really sad situation. It was really frustrating, and it wasn't good. So yeah, that's my experience with HPSP. I know a lot of people who have had great experiences with it. I had a professor who actually did HPSP. He was one of the influencers on me of wanting to do it, and he said it was life-changing to him. It opened up so many opportunities, and he loved it, and he was so glad he did it. So I mean, it works out for a lot of people. Maybe I just got stuck with some bad communicators or something, I don't really know. But nothing really seemed to work out during my cycle for the HPSP. With that though, I'm still a proponent of the scholarship. I think that if you want to do it, you should definitely try and apply, but know what you're getting into. know that you're probably going to have to submit tons of paperwork. You're going to have to get your medical records, so make sure you have those readily accessible so that you can get those sent over to your recruiters and not have all the issues that I had. And then also it helps to not have any like significant past medical history, so that you don't have to worry about sending in like weird documents like MRIs and x-rays and things, PT notes and stuff like that. It's not an automatic disqualifier, but it does make things easier. I also think it's really important to have good communication with your recruiter who you're working with, because it would be like sometimes 2-3 weeks between me submitting something and emailing my recruiter and saying, hey, do you need anything else? And then he would reply and say, oh yeah, we actually do need this because it got denied. So a good communication, I think, can definitely help out if you're applying for the HPSP. And then the last thing I want to mention is that my recruiters kept harping on this, in that the job of the like HPSP people is to disqualify you. They don't want you to get the scholarship because they need to make sure that you are like fit for the military, that you're going to be a good recipient of the scholarship. Like they have all these checkpoints to disqualify you. So like when you get sent to Meps, they're looking for just tiny reasons to disqualify you, like a 7-year-old jaw injury that has nothing to do with anything anymore. So my recruiter just kept telling me, don't give them a reason to disqualify you. So I'm going to repeat that here. Like if you're doing the HPSP, I think it's great, but don't give the military a reason to disqualify you.